Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Lauren, and today I am going to be talking about what I would say were my favorite books that I read in 2022. So a couple of things to start with. First of all, I am not going to rehash the synopses of all of these books because I've already covered them in previous reviews. So if you would like to hear more about each of these books individually, I will leave links to those videos where I reviewed them in the comment section down below. The second thing that I want to say is that in order to keep this video from being ridiculously long, I have limited this to my five favorites of 2022, though there are a handful of honorable mentions that I'm going to talk about as well. That leads me to the first thing I would like to cover, which is what makes a book truly great for me. It is a combination of things. I am primarily a plot-driven reader, so a book, first and foremost, has to be interesting to me, exciting, something like I have to love the concept, the premise, the action in the book, just really, I have to get invested into whatever is happening. Another thing that is very important to me is the writing quality and the writing style. It's below plot for me, but I do factor that into like picking out my favorite books. My honorable mentions, book list, these books really excelled in one way or the other, but not in both. So though I may have, really loved them for particular reasons, they just, between like the plot, the storyline, the concept, and the writing quality, they weren't both high enough to make the cut to the very favorites list. Still, I want to talk about them, though. I want to mention them because I loved them. Two books that I want to mention are books that, if we were going on plot alone, absolutely a couple of my favorites, but writing-wise, just not to the standard that I would prefer. The first one is 14 by Peter Clines. This book was such an incredibly good time for me. This book is a little cheesy, I'm not gonna lie. There are some things about this that are pretty cheesy. You really have to suspend your disbelief, but this was one of the best times I had reading all year long. I loved it. I'm not a big rereader, but still, this is a book, even not being a big rereader, I would read it again. It was just that much fun. The other one that I want to mention, great plot, great time reading it, just not exactly a literary masterpiece, and it was The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. This is a sci-fi horror, and a book that really made me feel like sci-fi horror, that might be a real thing for me, because this book is so intense. Like, you are on the edge of your seat for this book. There was a part in this book that actually did kind of scare me a little bit, like horror stories. That's not common for me, for a horror story to literally scare me, but there was at one point in the book where I did not want to go downstairs in my house at night because I was kind of freaked out. I absolutely love this, and I am actually reading another Caitlin Starling in January. I think I'm going to be reading The Death of Jane Lawrence, so I am really curious to see if this was just like, a one-hit wonder for me, or if this author's writing style is for me. So a few more honorable mentions for me, kind of in the opposite direction. These books, the writing I found to be just top-notch, magnificent writing, and the plots were good. Not great, but really good and enjoyable. Not at the very top, just right under that. The first one in that group would be Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which I do in fact own a physical copy of this book, but I cannot find it. Probably right behind me. I'm sure someone will be like, look, it's right there behind you, but I'm just not seeing it. I did my first and only so far vlog reading Piranesi this year. I read it in a day and absolutely loved it. I had never read anything like it. I would be excited to find another, I really like conceptually in the writing style of this book, I would really like to find another book that sort of did something similarly to what this one did. Very good time. I was skeptical before I went into it, but I ended up absolutely loving Piranesi. The next one that I absolutely adored the writing style and just had an overall good time reading it was The City of Dreaming Books. This book, it is also just insanely creative story, and the writing in it, This is some of the best writing that I've ever read, though it is a bit dense. Like going into this book, if you were to decide to pick this up, just know going into it, it is a very dense writing style. It was so much fun. Also a book, I've never read anything like it, and I honestly don't think I will ever read another thing quite like this. This is something special. Honestly, this one and the last of this group, they just nearly made it into the top 5, but not quite, but absolutely love this one. The final honorable mention, that this book, it is absolutely beautiful. The writing is absolutely beautiful, and yeah, just a great book, is The Strange Bird by Jeff Vandermeer. This is a novella that is set in the Born universe, which Born by Jeff Vandermeer is absolutely one of my favorite books that I have ever read. But this book, it is so beautiful. The writing style is gorgeous. And it's a quick read. Like this is not a hard book to get into by any stretch of the imagination. It is absolutely just almost ethereally lovely. If you have not read Born, first of all, read Born. But if you've read Born and you have not gotten to The Strange Bird yet, do it. Like this is excellent. This book is absolutely excellent. So those are all of my honorable mentions. So let's jump into my top 5 favorite books that I read in 2022. So the first couple books on here at the bottom, which I have a tie for the 5th space, I could not decide between the two of these, which would be in the number 5 slot. I love them equally. So at the bottom here, we have these 2 books. And I also, by the way, want to mention, I think in 2022, I read a grand total of 76 books. So in the number 5 slot out of 76, we have a tie. The first book in the tie is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. It's a sci-fi novel and it's set in space. And I mean, this is a very, very popular book, and with good reason. I was sucked into this book from the first page, and it held me absolutely wrapped through the whole thing to the very end. I love the way that Andy Weir writes relatively technical sci-fi, scientific information in his sci-fi novels, but writes it in such a way that it is very accessible to most anyone, and even if you don't understand what he's saying exactly, it does not detract from your overall enjoyment of the story. This book also has one of my all-time favorite tropes in it, which is like the memory loss trope. The main character wakes up, doesn't know where he is, doesn't know who he is, has no idea how he got to where he is. And so a good chunk, like the first, quarter of this book, he's really trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and I was absolutely there for it. And tied for the number 5 slot, a book that I read relatively recently is The Call by Peter O'Gehan. This is one of the most criminally underread books that I think I have ever read. This is, I would say, kind of an urban fantasy horror story, and it has some truly horrific things in it. So know that if you are interested in going into this book. It's a YA, but it is dark. Like one of the darkest. Some of the imagery in this book is some of the darkest that I've ever read. This book, this author, this is an Irish author, and I'm pretty sure this is based on some kind of Irish folklore ideas. I could not put this book down. It was so good. I really enjoyed the writing. Conceptually, also a book I've just never read anything even almost like this. This was worth every second I spent, in it, deep in this book. I absolutely loved it. This was a great book. Coming in at number 4, we have A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. I just read this book in December, and it's pretty fresh on my mind. Sometimes the things that are more fresh on your mind tend to float at the top, but I don't think that that's the case here. Even if this had been the first book that I'd read in the year, I still believe that I would love this book as much as I do now. It would still be on this list. This is a sci-fi novel. It is the second book in the Wayfair series, and it just worked for me. A lot of people prefer the first book, The Long Way to a Small and Angry Planet, more, but this was by far my favorite of the two. The themes that Becky Chambers explored in this book, they really resonated with me. The characters, the kind of growth that they experienced throughout the course of the story, it was just perfectly executed. The message that I really got from this was incredibly meaningful to me. Though the writing isn't extremely it's not like collegiate and technical. It is just, it's smart. The way she writes, the way that she sort of unfolds her concept, the way she unfolds her message it's brilliant. Like, she's just brilliant at doing that. One of my best books of last year was To Be Taught If Fortunate, a novella in this world set in the Wayfarer series. So I am really excited to get to the next book. Yeah, if you haven't picked up the series, absolutely you need to do it. And you like sci-fi, you need to do it. Pick this series up. In the number 3 slot, we have The Past is Red by Catherynne M. Valente. It's technically sci-fi, though it is not. It's more like dystopian. This is a dystopian novel. This is a short little book. I think it is not including the acknowledgments and all that. This book isn't even 150 pages long, and let me tell you, it packs a massive punch. This is a sci-fi novel, and it is set in a water world. It's been compared to Candide, like a sci-fi version of Candide, and I absolutely love this. The main reason that I love this is the main character, Tetley, is one of the most incredibly endearing characters that I have ever read. She's a hated character in this book. In fact, I think the first line of the book says something about how she's the most hated character, or she's the most hated person in her town. But she is also the most positive, optimistic character, despite being hated and treated incredibly badly by the people in this world. She just remains an optimistic ray of sunshine, and I loved her for it. This book, it is very deep and thematically rich and meaningful. It is simultaneously a delight and just a joy, and so funny, and also absolutely crushing. It blows my mind that this author was able to do what they did in this short of a story. This is a masterpiece. This book is an absolute masterpiece. It has one of the coolest, most beautiful covers on a book that I've ever read. I would not change a thing about this book. I think everyone needs to pick this book out. This is an easy read, easy to get into. Just, it pulls you in. The characters are well developed. The concept is excellent. Just a fantastic read. Number 2 on the list, I would be absolutely remiss if I did not have this on the list and have it in the position that I have it in, and that is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I'll try to hold this in such a way that I'm not blinding you with its reflective surface. Unpopular opinion, it seems like most people prefer the second book, Words of Radiance, to Way of Kings. I've read them both, and I prefer The Way of Kings. I'm not a huge high fantasy reader, but this one is fantastic. It absolutely sucked me in, and this is a huge book. This is a ride. Getting into a book this thick, you have to really want it. So it was an investment of time. It was an investment of a lot of things, the mental space, the emotion, the time, just everything. But it was worth every single page of it. This world was brand new to me, and getting to learn about it and explore it, and it just being very fresh and unfamiliar, and that experience of just jumping into this world for the first time was very profound for me. I really like the plot of this book. I think it is absolutely fascinating. It's not incredibly magical yet. I think, from what I understand, as the series progresses, it becomes more and more so, which I think that this is ultimately, the series is going to be maybe 10 books. It's taking its time unfolding the magic system, and I love that about it. And the thing I love the most, the end of this book, the last battle of the book, so to speak, was an absolute mic drop. It was one of the best endings I think I've ever read. There is a reason that everybody is so into the series. I get it now. I never thought I would read it, and sort of was a little skeptical, but picked it up anyway, and I'm super glad I did. It's primo. Last but not least, which actually I guess technically it's first and not last, the number 1 book that I loved in 2022 is The Electric State by Simon Stålenhag. This is also one in a series, though they are standalones, and I also read Tales from the Loop, which they've made a TV show based upon. I've watched a few of the episodes. fantastic. Not only was this my favorite book that I've read in 2022, this is one of my all-time favorite books that I have read in my entire life. First of all, let's just talk about the quality of just the book itself and the artwork in it. Simon Stålenhag is an artist, and you can see it's kind of has this like coffee table dimension, but the artwork in this book is just gorgeous. There's full spreads, and there is a story in here as well, like kind of half and half illustration and storytelling. But this book, it's beautiful. Like the artwork is absolutely beautiful, as well as the story. The story is undescribably beautiful. This book made me cry like a baby. Like these other books, yes, I cried in, you know, like a couple tears and just a little sob, but this, I wept at the end of this book. The way it starts out and kind of how the story unfolds, you know it's going somewhere, but you don't really know where. I guess what you would call like the final reveal absolutely broke me, but in a good way. You might want to bring a hanky if you decide to read this book. I think everyone should read this, but know going into it that it hits you straight in the heart. Like it has a gut punch of an ending. It is a fully immersive experience. I would also say if you are interested in reading this book, plan to do it in one full sitting, 1 or 2 full sittings. Like read large swaths of this at once. If you want the full impact of the ending, you just need to let yourself like get fully invested and absorb each spread, each page in this, and each bit of the story. I don't know, I'm curious if you've read this before. Is it just me, or is this not just like one of the best books you have ever read? This, probably more so than any of these. I want to talk to you about it in the comments down below. Like, was this as profound to you if you read it as it was to me? Like, what kind of experience did you have reading this book? All of them, honestly, as well. I would love to know if you would agree that there are reasons for all of these books to be in the top 5. So please talk to me about it in the comments down below. All right, so I think that is going to be it for me today. These are the best books that I feel like I read in 2022. I hope that you will talk to me about them in the comments down below if you've read them before, what you thought about them, if you now have any interest in maybe picking any of them up, if they sound good to you. I'd love to talk to you about it down below, as well as your favorite books from 2022. I would absolutely love to hear what made the top of your list this past year. If you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will like it and possibly subscribe, and I will see you next time.